myself, and I'm in the Midwest, is located and doing this work in the South, right? Like, we know Ryan's in Birmingham, Alabama. Cody, where
I'm in Illinois, but I come from the South.
you come from the South. Okay, you're in Illinois.
Yeah.
Okay. And Tommie, where are you located?
I am in Milford, Connecticut.
Oh, you're in Connecticut. Okay. Okay. I know we had at least so we have two folks who are located in the South, and Cody comes from the South. So, I mean, it feels really, significant, because there's things going on in Michigan too, but there's things going on all over the country. And I think there's stereotypes about the South. And we did talk a little bit about that earlier, that sometimes, the stereotypes aren't exactly what's going on right in that location. So, yeah. Any other thoughts on that, Cody or Ryan?
Yeah, I want to chime in on the overwhelming. For me, I guess it's a little bit different. For me, you look at my background and you can see, like, I spent a lot of time on the campaign trail. I spent a lot of time I got into politics primarily because I wanted to help people. I wanted to do good for other people. That was the passion for getting into politics in general. For me, what's really disheartening and sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming for me is that these are friends of mine that are in policy-making positions now. I mean, the Alabama legislature, I worked on campaigns getting about 3/4 of them elected at some point or another. And so I thought I knew who they were, and I thought I kind of knew where their heads were on things. And that was fine when I was in the closet, everything was okay. Come out of the closet, and then you find out that you don't really know these people, or the ones that really irritate me sometimes are the ones I'll get the calls like, I don't really think that, but I have to vote that way to get reelected. Well, no, you don't actually, really and truly. And, that's for me, that is the overwhelming. And I guess that makes it a little bit more personal, because these are relationships with people that I actually have, and being routinely disappointed by people that you thought you knew and thought that, you've had dinner with their families, their kids, you've been to baseball games, you've spent countless hours with these people. For me, that's the overwhelming aspect. It's not just the policies that are coming out, although in Alabama, we had, I think, 7 or 8 anti-LGBTQ bills filed. Only one passed this last legislative session, which was a complete shock to me. Kudos to the Human Rights Campaign and their efforts here in Alabama for stopping those other bills, which was a complete shock to me. But it makes it a little more personal, even for me. The policy issues aside, for me, it feels much more personal in that, the people you have to smile to their faces and be nice to, but meanwhile they're out there, going to be your buddy behind everybody's back, but they're going to go out and pass policies that just kind of impact you in a negative light and impact your other friends in the community. For me, that's the overwhelming aspect most of the time. That's the overwhelming aspect.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like people who, there's a privilege in being able to vote in such a way that maybe you don't feel like it's impacting you, but it literally is impacting someone's ability to live, and sometimes their safety, and so I know that feeling too. I feel the same way, that it's like a slap in the face from people who you thought, cared about you and your family. So, and Cody, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, it can be overwhelming. And I think, especially coming as a place of a DEI professional, we have to represent all the different communities. I have 13 resource groups I oversee, and it's hard not to let my queer identity drive everything. But it's even trickier when we're in the crosshairs, because then it feels like if I don't shut up about this, then people are thinking that I'm doing that because I'm a queer person. But it's the same level of work that we put into the Black community when all the George Floyd stuff happened, right? This is just, we're under the microscope now, so you got to understand this is an important piece of DEI, not just because I'm queer. If you're doing DEI right now, this is the topic that we have to be on. It's also a little tricky because a lot of this has to do with political ideology, which is tough to talk about at work. But ultimately, all of this is not what dominates my headspace, because being queer in the job that I do is an overwhelmingly positive thing for me, because I get to get up in the morning and make a difference in some people's lives. I don't have to worry that the person that's in charge of this stuff represents my best interests, because it's me. And I know I'm putting in the work to make sure I represent all the intersectional identities correctly, and I have the people that can inform me of different backgrounds. Having a diverse team of people around me is really important to me. And I get to like walk that walk every day and put my head on my pillow at night proud because I helped people, period. So that, no, I don't feel overwhelmed.
Being in alignment with your work is like, I mean, it is a gift, and not everybody can say that they have that. So I definitely, that is one of the positives. I have had times when I felt like I've either had a vulnerability hangover, or, you know, when you're in the leadership role, like you can't just go, oh my gosh, I just want to lurk, or this is very emotional for me, so I'm just going to hang back. I feel like, you know, especially when a tragedy happens, and I mean, all of us have probably had that experience being in this role where these roles where, you know, it's like a tragedy has happened and a response needs to get made, and oh my gosh, I am the person who actually needs to make the response or write the response. And, you know, and sometimes, you know, I'm just like everybody watching or experiencing these things, either, you know, horrified, disappointed, all the emotions, terrified, you know, kind of experiencing those things. So that does add a layer of it. But, you know, the flip side is that we feel like we're doing something that is deeply important to both personally and for our communities. So speaking of, you know, the extra, you know, emotional, I would say labor sometimes that this work can take. You know, you're not just, you know, kind of rubber stamping things or moving around widgets. Like there's a different kind of energy that has to go into it. What do you do for self-care? I mean, where do you kind of go to, you know, recharge or kind of get out of that headspace? What do you do?
So go ahead, Ryan.
you know, I have a great therapist, one. No, I'm also a dad. I have a 6-year-old son. That is honestly one of my favorite things in the world, spending time with him. Reminding myself that a lot of the decisions that I make, the causes that I take as important causes, it's all trying to make sure that I leave a better world for him. It's also about making sure that he knows that he never has to be afraid about being whoever he wants to be to his father. That he is always going to be loved and accepted, and, you know, making sure that I can provide that safe space for him that may not always have been provided for me or other members of the community that are out there. Other than that, I ride my Peloton for at least an hour every day, and I make TikToks that I think are funny, even if no one else does. So
I got to look at those TikToks, Ryan. That's awesome.
Follow me. Absolutely.
Okay. So anyone else have any great self-care tips?
Well, I will say that, so I have a minor in political science. I was raised by politicians. I had the blue bloods, you know, dinner on Sundays, but we were politicians and different viewpoints from just all different. And so given that I raised in that environment, in this particular world, I actually learn more. I need to know what as much is happening. That's why when you said that, I go, I didn't read that. But I want to learn as much as I can from both sides of the spectrum, so then I can actually have a conversation, because I'm open to having conversations with people from all different points of views. And then the other thing that I do is I go, okay, what can I do with that? You know, so you create a project, or you create something or an action that you can take. So I'm fortunate, you know, Cody mentioned the DEI, you know, at where I work at Anywhere, I can create an ERG event. We've created, like, When Hate Becomes Law, and we discuss all the laws that are happening. We bring guest speakers in, so that for me is the self-care, because then I don't feel so helpless. You know, I'm actually taking some actions that are consistent with, you know, whatever that I said I'm committed to, with is equality for all. And so that's what I do for self-care. And I hate to say this, but I eat. Now, that's not really taking care. I need to be on Ryan's Peloton when he's not using it.
Eat food is lovely.
Look at, I am who I am. I watch TV. I use superhero shows and pretend that I am Wonder Woman. But that's really what I do.
I do the same thing.
I'm somebody that's all about, you know, it's these things you see behind me. This is bead art. That's a great stress reliever for me. That's a weird thing to say for self-care, but I make these things. I used to sell them, but then I just decided I'm making them for me because I like them. I don't want to give them away.
Love that.
But it's also, you know, RuPaul says this all the time, but it's, as queer people, we get to choose our family, and chosen family is so important for self-care. It's, you know, having those people that are going to support you and who you can support. For me, my love language is helping those that I love, right? And if I can feel helpful, I feel fulfilled. So my job does that for me, and my social circle does that for me, because people take my advice. That's so powerful. If you've got somebody who thrives like that, take their advice once. It's going to make their day. You know what I mean? I also, this is, I like to garden, that's helpful for me, and pets, but honestly,
We have a pet.
yeah, I've got a few. I've got a 3-month-old puppy that's like a tiny velociraptor. He's a nightmare and I love him, and he's anyway, but yeah, this Gizmo. But I like to take a look in the mirror and reflect on what I've accomplished and remind myself what I'm capable of. And one big thing that I do that I would task everybody to try is imagine what you would do if you had no restraints. And then reflect on what you can do to remove those restraints, or see if those restraints are valuable to you.
That's super profound.
Cool.
Cody. All of it. I'm like writing down notes. Thank you. Okay, anything more, Jen?
Well, actually, I am a gardener as well, Cody. So, we'll have to share some notes after this, and Tommie will send you, some fruits and vegetables. Okay. So, make your own fig spread. Also love to, spend time with my wife and our dogs, and we like to go to the mountains. We're close to the Smokies. So just really getting outdoors. Also volunteering. I am big on giving back to others, and kind of pouring that passion into various projects. And so, just, I guess, giving back is what helps me kind of work through it all.
There's all kinds of ways to do that. And I do think, there's all of the things that everyone mentioned here, like, super resonate. But one thing I will say is that I think when you, come from, feeling like you weren't accepted for who you are growing up, like finding, like what Cody said about people taking your advice, like finding that where you can maybe find connection with people who didn't understand, or you see a community shift, like that is super healing. And that's not necessarily self-care, because it's still part of the work. Maybe it is, but I feel like there are things that have been healed through doing this work, where when you see a community get to a place of support that you might not have expected, or you didn't see, growing up at a young age, and it is the most beautiful thing. So yeah, and I think that's probably drives all of us to probably work way more hours than we should in between the gardening and the pets and the superheroes and hobbies. But yeah, so one question, I just want to pivot a little bit, because we talked about this, we were talking a lot about this actually in the pre-call, and I touched on it in the opening. There's a lot of different rhetoric right now. Like there's this kind of more like media campaign that feels very attacking the LGBTQ plus community, particularly folks in the trans community, and about displaying symbols of pride. Is that so? And everyone here, for the most part, is either responsible for or does some things around, kind of the pride celebrations. Are you doing anything different? I mean, or how are you approaching that, given, some of the backlash that's happening right now?
Well, early on, like last year, because I'm not the current co-chair of the Real Pride ERG, but I had been for 3 years. Early on, when we started seeing this way back last year, sometime, we started noticing all the attacks on trans kids. And we realized we had a lot of parents, whether they were agents as well as employees, who either have a trans child. Our former CEO and president has a trans child. And so we started right away doing special sessions. We brought people in, Dr. Sharon Vermont from, Washington University, who's spoken around the country about transgender kids. And we also brought somebody in from Yale University in the gender pediatrics. We've, had somebody from HRC come and talk about the laws, because our trans kids, that's the thing that just, it all breaks your heart. But that innocence of not having, nothing to do with anything political all of a sudden, or they're now attacked. So we make a point now to really address, what our agents, what our employees are dealing with, from their kids coming out, and we've got parents going to different congresses across the state, having to actually for the first time advocate on their child's behalf, not just in a school, but in front of their state Congress or state representatives. So we've been doing what we can. And I think it has to do with the fact that we're a real estate company, possibly because we already have the Realtor Code of Ethics, we have fair housing. So we come from a place of, these are our protected classes. We need to protect them. And so, but we have for some time trying to address as much as we can. And then we have one-on-one conversations with people just so they can talk.
Not everybody realizes this about the real estate community. Like I hear a lot of, what do you call it? Like these stereotypical side comments about realtors and real estate. Like y'all probably don't care about that though. And I'm like, what you don't realize is that actually our community is really more vocal about some of these things than you might realize. And before we get to the others, I just want to ask, has anyone seen the Gabrielle Union speech? I think is at the Essence Board. That a parent, really standing up for their child and raising awareness in the community. That was a great example of that. I will see if I can find it and put it in the chat somewhere. But that is an example of, parents really standing up for their kids, and it's beautiful. So anyone else, like kind of, how are you treating Pride observations, given the rhetoric now? Like any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what we said right from the outset of Pride Month planning was we are not diminishing what we're doing at all. We're keeping exactly on pace and acting like this never happened. I don't want to address the fact that there's backlash. I mean, we certainly are in our content, but it's not going to affect the quality or the quantity of the events that we're doing in the slightest. May shift the tone for sure. And I've got to have people on that are willing to speak on this stuff, right? So we're looking for maybe some folks that are a little more political than we normally would get to be on our panels and that sort of thing. I think the way that the rhetoric has changed in our country is really kind of dramatic. And what you see is people being like emboldened and empowered to speak up about their distaste for the so-called gay agenda. And we see a ramp up of that same old song and dance about shoving something down someone's throat, right? But it's, if anything, it's like giving us a live and technicolor example of this is why we still need this.
Yeah, I think it kind of, maybe it heightens the importance of doing these things, right now, like of any time ever, is to really show support, because people you had to counter a very unsafe narrative.
Yeah. So, here in Birmingham, particularly at our association, we're in kind of an odd place. We're the largest realtor association in the state of Alabama. We represent 6 counties and 68 separate municipalities. And yes, Alabama is a ruby red state. We get it. We all know it. What's interesting about our jurisdiction, though, is Jefferson County, which is where the city of Birmingham is actually located in Jefferson County. It's probably the bluest county, one of the bluest counties in the entire state. But as these things often happen, right next door, or surrounded on all sides, we are the reddest of the red. So one of the things that we sponsored Pride this year, Central Alabama Pride. We sponsored it for the 2nd year in our association's history. I'm fortunate that I've got a great CEO and Amanda Creel that really supported us and knew that it was important to us and important to our membership that we have a presence. Last year we did we just did a booth at the Pride Fest. We talked about fair housing. This year we decided, since it went so well last year, we decided we would step it up a little bit this year. And we did a spot in the parade. We did the booth at the parade. We did a booth at the festival and everything. We sent an email out asking people to volunteer, let them know, hey, you have an opportunity to be in the parade. It's a lot of fun. Downtown Birmingham on a Saturday night, no funner place in the world. And then also take a shift. Well, obviously we got some backlash. We anticipated that. We got some backlash. For me, though, one of the things I took away from that, and I will stand on this 1000%. most of the people that volunteered with us at Pride, most of the realtors, the affiliates that volunteered with us at Pride, had never been involved with us here at the association in any way before, or in very small ways, or a very long time ago. For me, that was the validating part for me, was seeing that, you know, and I had several of them tell me, I had several friends call me and tell me, you know, we've never really gotten involved before because we didn't think y'all really necessarily did anything we were interested in or did anything for us. And so obviously, you know, that was part of it, was doing this, and I will stand by it, and I will always go by it. Like, for every one realtor that finally saw a safe place for them to come and be involved, where they were seen and they were valued and they were cared for, I'll take 1,000 angry phone calls every single day. For that one person that finally feels validated and feels seen and accepted by their industry.
That's awesome, Ryan. And Jen, yes, anything to add?
Yeah, so also lovely red state like Alabama up here. And Knoxville is actually a very blue area. And so our Pride is actually not hosted in June. We've moved it to October. We do have a smaller Pride event that takes place locally called Southside Pride, but we also have our main Pride Festival that takes place in October called Pride Fest, which is hosted by Knox Pride. And last year we had a booth. I have to say, since we started the DEI program, I've been getting us more involved in local events and things like that. To Ryan's point, you know, having a booth, those kinds of things. And this has been in the last couple of years. And so last year we had our first booth at the local Pride event, and it was one of the fastest events I have ever had anybody volunteer for, which was very heartwarming. You know, whether it's because they have siblings or children or relatives, friends that are within the community and they want to be supportive, you know, and they're like, oh, I want to be there, I want to be there. And I had to tell people, oh, we're full, you know, kind of a thing. Oh, you know, but as more events come along, we're, you know, happy to, you know, consider you and everything. But just seeing that support, especially in the South, I think it's huge, because, you know, being a child of the South, you know, I'm sure as you know, Cody and Ryan can relate to, it can be very hard in this part of the country, you know, being in the Bible Belt, being in an area that is extremely conservative, and yet feeling validated, being able to be yourself, right? So, you know, I have to say, I think that that's huge, and seeing that support hopefully shows others that the industry is for everyone. It's not just for people who look a particular way. You know, we're here to put everyone in a home, not just the select few who fit in this tiny box, you know, so.
And it's hugely transformative for the people who feel like they've had to hide or weren't sure if they were going to be safe, to see that particular kind of visibility. Like you said, Jen and Ryan, you know, that doing these events is like, you know, the kind of thing that actually makes people kind of finally feel safe to either participate, or they feel like this is a relevant group to them. And, you know, and it's hugely important, as people do have options, even in the realtor world, you know, people have options. I mean, it's not like there's one association, or, you know, there's some people who may opt to just kind of go it without being a realtor, or, you know, you can work at a lot of different companies, or you'll use a lot of different banks. So having, you know, seeing that support, and also for the employees, you know, is really impactful. And I have a related question, and Tommie touched on it a bit. We talked about this in the pre-call as well, that, you know, there may be some people in our communities right now who are feeling less safe. You know, there's some backlash. You know, you're hearing people are feeling more emboldened to say things that are really hurtful. So what are some of the things that all of you are doing, or that you're seeing being done in your communities to show that greater support for folks out there who are feeling, you know, either scared? I mean, because we also know there's mental health implications, you know, with some of this rhetoric. Maybe people are feeling business ramifications. They're feeling very worried about it all. So what are you doing in your communities to kind of offer that greater level of support?
I think it's a matter of letting people know that you're there. I think that the more of us in the community that say, we're here, we see you, we're here to support you, the more we can come together as a community, even though I know, we're spread out in various pockets, but the more we can come together, the more we can support each other, the safer we can feel, right? So, and, you have some who stand out more than others, right? So obviously I'm not wearing a long wig to work. I'm not dressing effeminate. I'm not setting a stereotypical Southern lady kind of persona, and I think it's just a matter of feeling comfortable in myself, but also knowing that I have the support of my local community. So.
Love
I
that.
think
Yeah.
the storytelling aspect is really big too. For us as queer people to tell, what's going on with us and be honest about it. I recently took a trip home to Georgia for the first time since COVID. And, this emboldening and empowering of these viewpoints has hit my family really hard. So there were things that were said to me while I was there that I've had to be open and honest with the people that I'm here at work with to say, hey, these are the types of things we're facing and none of it is okay, right? You don't write off the fact that your parent says something hateful to you, right? You come to your safe space and let's talk about this, but understand that what they're saying is not okay. I got hit with the, I don't mind you being gay, but you can't be shoving this down our throat. I got hit with that from my own family. I got hit with, what are the argument? My mom has this new husband that's not my favorite person in the world, but he says something along the lines of, when I was little, I had a proclivity for stealing, but I don't do that every day, and that brings me closer to God. And I'm like, okay, let's not even have this conversation, because please don't compare the way I was born to a proclivity to steal. That's not an appropriate comparison to make. But then I come back to work and I take that example and I dig into it and try to explain to people why that's not okay. It's not helpful for me to have that argument with this dude in Georgia, but I can pick it apart and show people why that narrative is a bad faith argument at work. Also at EXP, we have a great branded pride kit, which includes a list of responses, canned responses from a corporate perspective that are responses to those 4 or 5 same arguments that we see all of the time in response to pride marketing. The why are you shoving this down my throat? The why is corporate feel this is more important than talking about real estate? Those arguments that we always see, so that it takes the onus off of each one of our people in our queer community and our allies of having to put themselves through the mental anguish of typing out a response to all of these things, right? We also really clearly spell out these types of arguments are bad faith arguments. Engaging in them at all gives the other person the power, so don't, right? And I think that's been really helpful and useful for me, and I hope it's being useful for other people too.
I love that. Tools and talking points, just like giving people something they can say if they're asked.
We actually have we have been, and we've done it in Pride, because we actually have several events during our Pride Month to reach out to the community, but we do have ally training. I know Alliance also has an ally certification training. We do have an ally training. We have a pronoun training that we call, that we just had last week. We reach out to the community in a way do we want to educate. So on our big Pride event next week, we will have someone who's a drag queen to actually explain the art of drag queen, so that people understand that this actually, what is a drag queen and why are you a drag queen? And this is, the whole performance art aspect of it. So when you said reaching out to your community, so we do as much as we can to educate and to give people a sounding board. And we've done such a great job. And this is not me, Identity Tommie, but the fact that I've been allowed to be the spokesperson, for Anywhere, is that I now have people reaching out to me. I thought you were the person we should go talk to about this. And then, and then they ask me this question or they ask me this question, and I get to hear the celebrations and the joys of things that have been happening. And then I get to hear the heartbreaks, because we had someone whose child committed suicide a few weeks ago in the process of their transitioning surgery. And the thing that we're finding is it doesn't matter, because I'm in a blue state, but that doesn't mean I don't have, in fact, our stuff here is more covert, than what you actually know it's coming. It's behind me, and it's beside me. But, it is us doing what we can to, and we have a lot of collaboration events. We have our ERGs that collaborate together. So we're reaching out and learning more one another, but it is getting that message out that we're a safe space to come to, and so people do that, reach out to us. And if we don't have an answer, and if we don't have, like, we do have a transgender, an LGBTQ kit that we can give out to managers and leadership. But if we don't have the answer, we will do whatever we can to find the answer. And we've had people reach from London to India, because we are a global enterprise, that are dealing with all sorts of LGBTQ plus issues. And it's heartbreaking. And yet, it's a privilege for me to be able to have this voice and be in a position where somebody can pick up a phone or can shoot an email or a ping and say, I need to talk.
Yeah, it's hugely important to use that privilege if you can,
Mhm.
To kind of, because then you have this platform and it can really be helpful for folks. I mean, I have found, like that's, also I do the same thing in my role, is really constantly talk about things that other people might not feel as safe to talk about, and being out about my sexual orientation and talking about my stories, because if that helps someone else feel safe and know that they're safe, then that's huge. I mean, it's it seems simple, but it is, a huge, like, it's activism, but it's like the most basic thing. It's not like making a law or changing a law, but it's literally just being who you are in service of the community. And that's awesome. Ryan, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I think y'all covered pretty much kind of where I am on that one. Absolutely. I think there were some really great ideas. I would love to get a copy of that EXP toolkit on how to deal with the basic questions that we get asked. My personal favorite is, I don't care that you're gay, just don't hit on me. And I'm like, cool, bro, don't worry. Cool.
Doesn't work that way.
Trust me, you're not my type. Yeah, that.
Exactly. But no, I think those sound like really great ideas, things that we absolutely could use down here, things that we could be better about utilizing amongst our membership as well.
Yeah, at least you don't get, if only, Ryan, you met the right man.
Fair. I actually do occasionally, but
you don't get that one, although maybe
sometimes. I mean, look,
So, I think there's the one kind of, there's another thing that happens, I feel like, when you're in this space where you've got some people who are like, this organization or this company is not doing enough. Like, we want you to do all the things. We want everything to change right away. We've been waiting for this long. It's not right. And we want you to do all things. And then other people are like, whoa. Like, even just talking about it is like it's a lot of change. Even having an event is a lot, and so there's kind of like this middle ground that is hard to figure out where to be in, because you're never satisfying one side or the other. So, like, kind of how do you kind of bring people along or be sensitive to the folks who, kind of are on their learning journey. They're in a different place in their learning journey. Given that there are so many folks, including sometimes us, who feel like, oh my gosh, we should be further along right now. Like, we should be doing more things. Like, how do you strike that balance?
So for me, and this is a very timely, and if Amanda is watching, she knows how timely this is for me. I often get accused of wanting everything done right now, right away, whatever. And sometimes I have to be checked to remind myself that that's not necessarily how things work. One of the things, though, that I have recently, I recently heard a story about you should cater to the people that are willing, and you should cater to the people that are actually willing to take part. Someone being on their learning journey, that's great. Are they teachable? Are they coachable? Are they willing to even have the conversations? And I don't think you should ever say somebody is a lost cause on something, but after a while, you've got to move on to somebody that is in a better position to move forward at that time. I think it's important that we continue to try to educate and be open for conversations. And I am a typical type A where I don't like hearing criticism, and I don't take criticism very well. And I really don't like being told to slow down. And I really don't like being reminded to stay in my lane. Sometimes I have a tendency to get out of it a little bit. I think it's important that we continue to have those conversations. Bear in mind that everybody is at a different point. Nobody's opinion is necessarily invalid, and we shouldn't invalidate how other people feel. But at the same time, there comes a point where education and talking just gets to where it's just not constructive any longer. And if someone is not willing to even have those conversations or even willing to see it from a different point of view, it's time to move on to somebody who might be in a better position than you are.
Yeah, and I think, at EXP, we've got a whole ethics committee that reviews when people have these negative views and they're expressing them. And we see people express these views on our internal social media sites. And it's like, you're at work, what are you doing? But, that's part of this climate. People feel empowered to be able to say this wherever. And, that's my freedom of speech. But often, and I will say more than 50%, way more than 50% of the time, when we approach these people and say, hey, this is how you're being hurtful, here's some training on how you could do better, and here's why that would impact your business in a positive way and your life in a positive way, they come around more often than not. It sucks to have to punch somebody in the face with diversity, but sometimes that's what it takes. I think the challenge is really that as a major brand, we have to be cognizant of the fact that the people with opposing viewpoints aren't the enemy, right? They're our consumer, they're our agent, they're our bread and butter, and they hold a great value to us. And because we value them so deeply, and that's not just about money, that's about their value as human beings, which is, the core root of DEI philosophy, people's value as human beings. It's our job to use whatever platform we're given to compassionately educate. And what we're not going to do is entertain the thought that we should do it less because it makes people uncomfortable.
Right. And there's, go ahead, Jennifer. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no.
Well, no, I was going to say to Ryan and Cody's point, I mean, providing the educational pieces, being able to have the discussions, telling people, hey, I am open to a discussion, even if our viewpoints are not the same. You have to, I feel like in this line of work, be open to that, because if you're not, then you're immediately closing someone down and not having an opportunity to educate them on potentially something. So, being open to the discussions, having the material available, putting it out there. If they want to learn more, they know who they can reach out to, and then just being supportive of them, if they're on their journey, like Ryan was saying, be supportive and, help them along the way. Don't be like, oh, well, this is where you are, and you're not here yet, so see you, in a year or two, kind of thing. We have to be willing to grow. We'll have to be willing to grow those people, right, and help them along.
It's like the concept of calling in versus calling out. And I think since humans kind of have this natural tendency, and I think this is the reason why some people are afraid to come out. I mean, they're afraid that they're going to be excluded from their community, or they're not going to be liked. And that's a very primal thing. And I think even for people who are in a different place on their learning journey, maybe, they don't, first of all, sometimes they don't ask the questions that they have, or if they feel like they're being shut down, then, they might, kind of, there might be like a kind of a backlash from them. But if they feel like they're being invited into a conversation and being respected, sometimes it goes better. I mean, I think.
Well, I can attest to that, and I can tell you and give you a really great example of it. But I think, first of all, for myself and because of the company that I work for, we signed the Equality Act in 2017. And at that time, there was a big franchise that wanted to, be a part of, at that time, the Realty brand. And they said, well, you're going to have to be quiet about your support of the Equality Act. And they said, well, you probably aren't a fit for us. Now, that's the Reader Digest version of that story. Okay. But so the point is that you have a solid, firm stand. And then you know, from that solid, firm stand, you know, besides just being open, I'm curious. I'm curious as to why you feel that way, or I'm curious as to why you think that way. And, you know, the story, or one of the examples is, because I have my pronouns on my screen and I, you know, work with a lot of leadership across, you know, United States and Canada, have had people ask me about my pronouns. And I first say, well, you know, I've been saying she for my entire life because my name is legally Tommie. And so I've had to say this is she forever, so that people do know this is who I am, as opposed to expecting a guy to show up. And this one broker owner said, well, you know, I can understand that. He goes, but the other thing I think is sick. And I said, what do you think is sick? He goes, you know, the other use of pronouns, I don't get it. And I go, why is that? Now, I know there are people that could get mad at what he said. I go, I was curious. And I said, why do you think this way? And he started to talk about the English language. And then I said, well, you know, at one point in time in language, there was only one pronoun. He goes, really? I said, yeah. And in some languages still, there are no pronouns. No, I didn't know that. And then at the end of the conversation, he was like, well, I never thought of it that way. And then I also told him, I said, do you know that 1 in 5 people have pronouns that may be different than the pronouns you think they are? He goes, well, I don't think that's correct. I said, well, that's because you're judging 1 in 5 around you. It could be that people around you don't yet feel safe to share their self-expression with you, because that is it. They're sharing who they are with you. He goes, oh, so I could know. Yeah, you could. Oh,
You do, yeah.
you know, and so I don't know how many people that person comes in contact with, but, you know, instead of stopping the conversation and, you know, or moving on, I approach it, let's just be curious as to find out, why do you feel that way? Because a lot of times it is a lack of information, a lack of education, a lack of somebody taking a moment and listening to them and just saying, okay, here's how come I feel the way I do. Look, if my Uncle Jack, which we always said by marriage, because we didn't want to claim him because of his very, very right ways of living, can transform his way of feeling about the LGBTQ community when I was in my 20s, I'm pretty much thinking we can actually work with just about anyone. It just takes a moment of being able to, you know, be open and be curious and be willing to have that conversation with them.
That's huge. I mean, I feel like sometimes too, when you first hear someone say something that seems really insensitive, like I know for me, I get like really triggered and like work. And I feel like when you're really involved in DEI work, because you're going to get these triggers all the time, is to kind of breathe through it and then, you know, try to find a way to have that conversation, because I think that's where people might not all come out to the same opinion on something, because that's diversity, but you know, that's where the magic happens with the conversations. And I'd actually love to stay on that topic a little bit, because that was huge, Tommie. I mean, I feel like, you know, we all, that was like a one for the playbook of anyone, you know, who is involved with any other human beings on the planet, as to, you know, kind of how to kind of work through when someone has a difference of opinion about your identity, and they don't understand it. So I know Cody's talked about this awesome, you know, kind of talking points things, you know, I know there's all kinds of tactics out there. Anyone have like, you know, some stories of, you know, responses? I don't want to talk about all the terrible things people say, but you might in a story kind of say, you know, kind of how you've responded to something, or what's a way to respond in one of the objections that you hear for celebrating Pride, or about people not understanding folks in our community.
I can't say this is a personal story, but one of the things that I have been encouraged by of late here in Alabama, with the conclusion of our last legislative session, where, as I mentioned, the majority of the anti-LGBTQ bills failed, thankfully. I look for small victories that we're having as a community, that not just the real estate community, but the LGBTQ community. One of the classic examples is here in our offices. We're the Birmingham Association of Realtors. We're actually in Homewood, Alabama, which is just a suburb, or over the mountain, as we say, in Birmingham. Homewood is also the home of the Magic City Acceptance Academy. It is the first charter school in Alabama that's specifically for children or LGBTQ plus students. last election cycle, there was a gentleman that was running for governor. His father was a 2-term governor. He was running for governor. He attempted to target this charter school, use pictures of the kids from the charter school. They had a prom, they had an authenticity prom, I think they called it, where everybody could come as they wanted, whatever. He used actual live footage of those children from their prom in his campaign spots and was talking about when he was governor, this perversion would shut down, this would end. A lot of people thought this was going to play so well in Alabama. And honestly, you know, when you read the stereotypes, it was a safe bet that it would play well. He lost by double digits so quickly, fell out of the running, fell out of the primary. He was in 2010, he was literally 100 votes from becoming the next governor. He finished a distant 6th in a crowded primary last time around. And when you talk to even Republican primary voters on why did you not? He was polling so well, what made you change your mind? To a T, every single one of them said when he went after those kids at that school. I might not necessarily agree with with that school. I might not necessarily agree with that lifestyle. We hear those. But when he targeted those children, I was done. For me, that was a small victory that we took, that at least the Republican primary voters in Alabama, which pretty much decide politics in Alabama, had sense enough to get away from that. Also, right now here in Birmingham or in Alabama, book banning is back in fashion. If y'all didn't know, if y'all haven't seen this, book banning is back in style, huge around here right now. There are 3 big instances of this happening in Alabama right now. One is down in Fairhope, Alabama, which is the coastal cities. One is in Prattville, Alabama, which is a suburb of Montgomery, just north of. And then one is right here in our backyard here in Birmingham in North Shelby County. All 3 of those counties are 3 of the most conservative counties. All 3 of those cities are 3 of the most red cities you're going to run across in the entire state. A group of Roy Moore flunkies, y'all probably have heard of Roy Moore if you paid attention to politics a few years ago. A bunch of Roy Moore flunkies are staging massive protests, going to library board meetings, going to city council meetings, going to county commission meetings, forcing them to take down the pride section in the young adult section at their local libraries. And I mean, it's gotten very heated. It's getting very bad. And every single one of those cities, every single one of those libraries has refused to back down and has refused to remove the pride section from those libraries. And in Shelby County, which is my public library, it's literally down the street from where I live is the public library. And if my child could read, we would go, but to the young adult section. But they have not backed down. And for me, those are small victories that I'm seeing that maybe while things aren't looking great, you know, systemically, there are small victories here in our backyard that mean the world to me and that are very important to me. And for me, validate the work that I do and validate our commitment. And I think our association's commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion. So that's one of the things I'm doing these days.
That's great news. And also, like, you know, really there's ways that and maybe in a sense, you know, sometimes people shoot themselves in the foot, you know, like that candidate was, you know, that was just the response was just like a no. So you don't even have to do anything. And actually it's heartening that it didn't work, you know, because I think that would have been extremely disappointing if it did work, but that's all amazing. So anyone else have any kind of responses, you know, or any kind of something you're seeing that like kind of counters that?
Yeah, you know, I mentioned it briefly earlier, but you know, when we talk about homosexuality, a lot of people only have a religious take on it. And trying to come to someone gingerly and gently that there are viewpoints outside of religion that exist. There's science, you know, and there's other ways of looking at this. It's hard to put that viewpoint as the only thing that determines whether something is good or not, when not everybody holds your viewpoint. That's the point of diversity and inclusion, right? Is that we appreciate people from all different backgrounds. That one's always been a really tough one for me because I come from a family who that is the only thing that drives what they believe about anything, right? And it's not actually scripture that they believe, it's actually what their pastor has told them, right? Mm-hmm. And anytime you give someone that much power over what you believe in your life, it's dangerous, right? You have to be able to think for yourself. And I think more than ever, we're at a point where, and I say more than ever now, but I would have said more than ever last year or the year before that, we're at a point where our allies are going to be what drives us forward. Mm-hmm. It's about people like weaponizing their privilege, in my career as a DEI professional, yes, I am a queer man, but that's part of my identity. The other part is I'm a white man, right? And that gives me access in some doors that other people don't have, and gives me a microphone that people listen to that other people wouldn't have. And I say this all the time, you're going to hear it from me every time you ever have me on a panel, every time you ever see me in person, you're going to hear this from me. But my DEI journey was sparked by a woman named Amber Hikes, who is the person who created the Philly Pride flag and put the black and brown stripes on there. And she said at Out and Equal in 2019, it's not the responsibility of people of color to fight racism, nor is it the responsibility of women to fight sexism and misogyny. The onus is not on trans people to fight transphobia, and it's certainly not on people with disabilities to combat ableism. It's your responsibility and my responsibility and our collective responsibility to stand up for these people, right? That's gay people are going to get burnt out of always having to fight for their human rights. And the only way we're going to be able to keep those human rights is for straight people to stand up for us. So we have to win these hearts and minds. It's not a question of should we fight these battles. We have to. There's not enough gay people in the world for us to win this fight. It's not going to happen. So, allyship is it's going to be the key for maybe forever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything more to add on that, Jennifer?
Well, I'd have to say that, to Ryan's point, finding those small wins where you can get them, to Cody's point, talking about allies being, part of the backbone of us continuing to move forward. I think that on one hand, the small wins are what help keep us energized in a world where we're seeing a lot of, pressure to bow down to those who feel like this isn't right. And I think that having our allies being empowered to help squash that is huge. And I'm not saying I'm advocating on the allies to go, yeah, it's about us, but what I'm saying is it's for the allies to be like, hey, I'm with them and I support them and I'm not okay with what your message is, and putting their foot down. And until we have more of that, we will continue to have a lot of what we're seeing. And I don't care if that's with regards to, the LGBTQ plus community, POC community, it doesn't matter. We shouldn't be allowing that, period. Regardless of what community we're talking about. It's just not okay. And we're in a day and an age where we know better and we should do better than what we're presently doing. So
I think you raise a good point, and I have a follow-up question that's based on that, Jennifer, if I may, because I think so. I gave a talk this morning with the AEs in the Michigan Realtor community, the local associations, and and I was thinking about kind of how I was going to come into this space, and we know that for some folks, they're like, oh, diversity is over there, or they think of diversity as something only for those people to participate in, and then they don't engage, versus something an organization needs to have infused in its entire, in everything that it does, that it's as imperative as legal and HR. And I would suggest that it is. Now, when you think about it that way, there's going to be folks who are not in every single community, although we all do have a race, and we all do have a gender, we all have a sexual orientation, all of that. So I think othering people permanently is definitely not the way, because that's a way to kind of bake in the issues that we have. But, there has to be a role for allies who aren't in a particular community if we know that community is either underserved or experiences discrimination or marginalization. So I guess I would ask all of you, what would be you know, the kind of ways that you wish allies would show up. So for all the allies who are watching, you know, what are we wanting them to do? And I see Tommie is wanting to
Yeah,
jump in there.
She's ready.
What's first and foremost is we have to be an ally as well. We are other. I am Cody's ally. I am Ryan's ally. I am Farrah's ally. You know, I am my friend Natasha's ally, who is a Black woman, you know, a straight Black woman. I am your ally, and I will stand in front. As I've said before, I'll stand in front, I'll stand behind, I'll stand beside you, whatever is necessary. So we can't always just have it be that we need you. It's that we need one another to be allies from one another. So that's first and foremost. And the other thing is to not be a mystery, you know, and that's the very first time I came out to somebody a long time ago. It might be longer than some of y'all are even alive. That Ronnie, I'll never forget, said, the more you come out and the more you talk and the more you tell your story, you know, you're no longer a mystery to me. And then I can stand by you. And so it is us to keep sharing, you know, and not just sharing that I'm a gay woman. You know, I do sometimes get that, yes, I'm gay. Yes, I'm gay. But I'm also a Jew. So I'm Jewish. I'm Cherokee Indian. I know you all thought the blonde hair was a good giveaway on that one. You know, I'm there's a lot, I'm a Cardinal fan. There's a lot more about me than just this. And so the more we share ourselves and embrace one another and show up for the other groups, you know, like show up at their events, show up for them and be by their side as well. You know, there's no way I was going to miss the Juneteenth celebration in downtown Milford, population 59,000. Yes, we had one. You know, there's no way I'm not going to show up for this and that. And that is for us to show up as well.
I love
Yes.
that.
You know,
Love that. Okay, Jennifer has something. Ryan and Jennifer. So Jennifer, then Ryan.
So, Tommie, I love what you're saying about, you know, showing up. That is actually something that, so I'm a member of the DEI task force with the state MBA group. And one of our biggest things is showing up and supporting others, right? So, you know, inviting, being inclusive, supporting these others, you know, and that's the thing, is that we are allies of each other, right? At the end of the day, I think that that's, you know, perfect what you're saying, Tommie, because that's absolutely true. You know, we need to support each other, and kind of taking that a step further, also, you know, kind of circling back to what our industry does is put people in homes. You know, at the end of the day, if you're looking at the metrics of where we are going as a country and you're not being inclusive, well, you are way behind, and you're behind right now. So, you know, you should really be embracing that inclusiveness. You should really be embracing the change that we will be seeing and that we are experiencing now in the way our country is moving forward. And what does that look like down the road? So, you know, I absolutely encourage people to be allies of each other. And I think that that's absolutely the way that we move forward. So sorry, Ryan, I totally cut you off.
Nope, no, that was great. That was great. Really, what I would say is, you know, is remind them that, you know, allyship is not supposed to be easy. That when you agree to become an ally, you are essentially saying, kind of like Cody said, I'm going to loan you my privilege. I'm going to give you this so that I can stand with you while you're struggling. You're marginalized. I'm not. But because I see that marginalization happening, because I see the injustice that's happening to you, I'm going to stand there with you. And so being an ally is not supposed to be easy. You know, it's supposed to be uncomfortable. You are literally taking on the mantle of someone else who is being treated unjustly, who is being treated with a sense of discrimination. You know, I talk about this all the time. You know, I, like Cody, I'm a white guy. So I mean, that does give me some access to some things that I wouldn't normally have. I hid in the closet for a very long time because I didn't think I'd be able to have the kind of career that I wanted to have. It wasn't a religious thing in my house. It wasn't anything. It was really, I wanted a certain career. I thought I knew what I wanted, and I didn't think I could get there. Then life is funny and things happen, you come out. So I literally became a gay man and an ally on the same day. And some of my friends would tell you, I busted up out the closet and haven't shut up about it since. But that's what it's supposed to be. We are allyship. We're supposed to be one another's allies. Absolutely. Allyship is not easy. It's not casual. It's not, I bought a t-shirt at Target before they moved it to the back of the store. Allyship is a dedication. You are taking on somebody else's struggle as your own. It's not supposed to be easy. I think that's something that needs to be stressed to people that want to be true, dependable allies to the community.
Yeah. And, we're working at EXP to offer like active allyship certifications, right? Where we teach that active and effective allies are what's needed. Because if you're not active and effective, the opposite of that is static and ineffective, which is not really an ally, right? The thing about having privilege is it puts you in conversations with people who are going to challenge your support of the non-privileged, and you have to speak up every time, right? And that can be gently, that can be, as simple as don't go there, and then have a conversation side separately afterwards, but we can't allow this pervasive thing to invade our society. And it's going to be our allies that speak up for us on this kind of thing. Like when I was at home with my parents in Georgia, we're watching a commercial and there was a trans woman on the commercial, right? And my mom goes, is that supposed to be a woman or something? Right? This is a teachable moment. Yes, it's supposed to be a woman, Mom, because it is a woman. Is this person wearing female clothing? Then the odds are, and this is me making an assumption, that person identifies as female, right? And you have to respect that. Well, I just don't get it. Well, that's because you don't live that experience, but I'm telling you, you can get it, right? It takes a very little effort, very little brain space to make that leap. You just have to be willing to make that giant leap for mankind, as it were.
I love that. Giant leap for mankind.
Yeah.
Hey, Farrell, can I add one thing? May I add one thing?
Sure.
Okay, he's trying to stop me, right? There's the other piece of being an ally, is this: we support our allies. I had this epiphany about a month too late. And it was after Anheuser-Busch, and I have an affinity for Anheuser-Busch because I'm from St. Louis. I love the Clydesdales. When that whole thing happened, what I didn't do is I didn't go out and buy a case of beer. You know what? I didn't, and I don't drink beer, but it didn't dawn on me to call out to all my LGBTQ, friends and allies, go buy a case of beer in order to support AB. So when they lost their revenue, because of what they actually did a 1 6-pack for the one country singer, I didn't support them in what they did. And Bud Light has been supporting sporting events that I've been participating in since the late 80s when I was in diapers playing sports. Not that I was not in diapers back then, but they've always supported our events in St. Louis. And so I didn't do that, and I went to Target, and now in our Target, the Pride merchandise was up front. I walked past it and I said, you know what? I don't need another Pride flag. I have 4 if anybody needs one, but I bought another Pride flag and I bought a backpack because they're doing what they can to support us. I imagine for other security reasons, they have it in the back, but it's still there. We need to make sure we're supporting them as they support us.
Yeah, they may not keep it if no one buys it. It might be hard to kind of continue to stock it.
Well, yeah, because they don't want to be on their own. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
If we're not standing up and saying, okay, we really appreciate it. So y'all go out and buy a case of beer tonight. Oh, actually, make sure it's Bud Light. Don't buy.
To your point, I mean, if you want to start talking about the cancel culture thing, the trend that's going on right now, I mean, every time they talk about canceling someone, someone turns around and goes, oh, well, I guess you can't eat here, or I guess you can't buy vehicles from here, or you can't go to this place or go to this place because you know what? All of these people either support the LGBTQ plus community actively, donate to community groups, or, I just a myriad of things. And I'm just like, when you start thinking about that, it's like one great post was that I saw recently. It had to do with fast food restaurants. It's like, where are y'all going to eat? Because it was all of these restaurants, and they were all supportive. And I was just like,
Yeah. I think an important piece of this too is that showing up for our people that live in the places that are bad right now. You know what I mean? We got a lot of flack because our shareholder summit that we just got wrapped up with was in Orlando, and people were saying, a lot of people from our queer community were saying, why are you going to Florida? You have to pull out of this. But the line that we always give, and it's not just a line, because I really believe this, is EXP is a global company. We operate in a lot of places where it's illegal to be gay, and we will operate in a lot of places where it's dangerous to be gay. But we offer a safe space because we have a code of ethics that protects our employees. So if we're giving queer people a place to come to work and be themselves without worry of being put in jail or being fired, then we have to be in those safe spaces, right? When we went to Orlando and we were in our booth and I was wearing my Say Gay t-shirt, right? People were coming up to me and saying, thank God you're here, because I feel no support right now.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
That's important.
Absolutely.
I think there's a point that came up, and I didn't want to interject because this has been a great conversation. But one thing that I said earlier in the talk that I gave earlier is that, rather than, do DEI work in a way where we're talking about individuals, like this person has bias or I'm dealing with my bias, is having, and this is an allyship thing, having us all be stewards of the type of organizations and the type of communities that we'd like to see. And that way, we're all allies of this culture we want to have that is inclusive. We're all supporting each other. We're all feeling safe to share our own stories and making a safe space for other people. So, it gives a role for everyone. And again, you don't always know, some folks fly below the radar, and for many of us, you're always coming out, and, and it's okay. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to come out again because I want to talk about this thing, but I'm going to make it about this identity right now because it's important. It is. But, it's also about making sure that the value of every single person, hopefully, is that we can agree on is, the kind of organization that we want to have. And that is, the way that people can really show up as allies as far as kind of their work with an organization. So I have one more question I want to ask. I know we're kind of coming to the end, and then I have a few closing remarks. So but we have a little bit of time left. So it's that, the DEI work, and we talked about the self-care that's involved and, some of the emotional labor. It sounds like many of us are energized by this work. It's healing. It feels like you're doing something and not just despairing, given certain work that still needs to happen. So, but there may be some people who are finding it hard or finding it scary or, or whatever the case may be, particularly people who haven't chosen this life of DEI work where, you're really putting yourself out there. So, as folks get involved in the Alliance, or they're getting involved in diversity work, I've had calls from people who are just like, I'm coming out, I'm new to this, or whatever the case may be. And, I'm just looking for some support. What advice would you give? Because we were all new to this at some point, to those folks who are, kind of doing DEI work, or even new to DEI work, or new to being either an ally or, being an advocate for our community and from within the community.
Don't give up.
That's it. Don't give up.
Don't give up. You're going to have days where it's really hard, and it's hard to draw that line between personal and business. And you may not always agree with what's happening, but don't give up, because the minute we give up, the minute others win, right? So absolutely stick to it. you know, find your people, find your team, get your committee. Let's, you know, get the group that's going to be actionable, wants to be actionable, has that passion in their heart, and just keep moving forward. You know, that's the one best piece of advice that I can give.
Yeah, and I'd say a lot of us that I find is a through line for all the DEI professionals I know, we all come to this point where we realize if it's not me, then who? And the answer often is nobody, right? So do it. Don't be afraid. Do it. You have to take these steps. And I also will say that we are in a tough time for queer people right now in America. This will pass. This isn't forever. The pendulum will swing back our way. We'll always have opposition. It's bad now. It could get worse, but it's not forever.
Absolutely. It's sometimes there are some days in doing this work that are completely devastating, completely. And sometimes it's the thing you tried to do and there was that no, or there was that well, or sometimes it's something that happens in the world or some terrible, terrible thing happening. And it just feels like crushing. So I love the encouragement. So, okay, Ryan and Tommie, any advice that you have?
I guess I would just, really and truly, I don't know what else to add. I think Jennifer and Cody kind of hit it out of the ballpark here. I think they stole all the answers. Don't give up, keep your head up. I always like to remind myself that, walk softly and carry a big stick, just be ready to go at a moment's notice and be willing to go where the current takes you. Obviously that's another one that for me is kind of there. Be willing to kind of see what's out there. Let go of kind of your own ideas, which there are people rolling their eyes that I'm saying that right now, but let your own agenda out of the way sometime and don't be afraid to see where the current takes you.
I love that. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, Tommie.
So in 92, just laugh because I know some of you weren't born. In 92, I was the first co-chair for the first HRC dinner in St. Louis, and David Lauber, who was sitting next to me at the very first meeting, we both looked at each other and I said, do you think we're ever going to have rights in our lifetime? And he said, probably not. But that's not what we're here for. We're here to actually move something forward. So what we thought was possible then, or actually almost impossible then, became possible. We have moved an enormous and taken enormous ground. So if anything is that just keep believing that anything's possible, and it only takes one person to move the needle. And sometimes you're that one person, or sometimes it's going to be someone else, but don't think that you can't move the needle because it just takes one person and then another person and another person. So I would just say, to really keep believing that whatever you want to create, and whatever that you want possible is totally doable, because it just takes normal people to have create extraordinary results in their lives and our lives.
It's so true. Oh my gosh, I'm so encouraged by all of your words. That was really wonderful, Tommie, and very true. Like when we think about where all of the gains actually that have been made, even though we're in this period of time right now, like who would have thought that marriage for the LGBTQ plus community would be the law of the land. That's huge, and I think there were probably a lot of people who did not think that was going to be the case, and we have to keep showing up and doing this work, and because amazing things are happening and can happen. So I love that. So one announcement, and I think maybe Mary or Ryan can put in the chat, but I think we cannot end this event without mentioning the annual conference, the LGBTQ Plus Alliance annual conference. It's fun, it's informative. It was incredible last year. It's going to be in Houston, September 26th through 28th. And so I think we can get the link in the chat. And then I want to also just really thank everyone for watching, whether you're on LinkedIn or, on somebody's social media, if you're in the Zoom, especially the allies. You know, there are companies and celebrities that are, you know, have invited criticism, you know, they're withstanding this criticism and they're doing it anyway, you know, and shout out to them. I mean, you know, we have been, many of us, the folks who respond to the criticism. It's not easy. And sometimes it can feel like when someone says, why are you doing something, that you should just stop. And so awesome that you're here. Awesome that you're continuing. And we really appreciate you. And so I had these quotes teed up, I'm not lying, and they are absolutely appropriate for this conversation. So here's the quotes I'm going to end on. And so this is something I've been saying for the last couple of weeks over and over again. It just keeps popping up, and it's Zora Neale Hurston. If you are silent about your pain, they will kill you and say you enjoyed it. I love this. And this is, you know, it's hard to bear your pain. You sometimes get triggered and re-traumatized when you tell a story, or when you tell your story. But it is very, very important to kind of express, you know, when something isn't right, so that, you know, people understand that we saw that, and we are advocating for ourselves and our community. And one other thing, Bishop Desmond Tutu, who was a huge actual ally for the LGBTQ plus community, said, if you are neutral, you all will know this, but this is very appropriate. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks for all that you do. This panel is amazing. Thanks to all of you, Cody, Ryan, Tommie, and Jennifer. I am in the presence of people who are doing incredible, brilliant work, and I'm just extremely honored.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Gosh, it was a